In this portion of the presentation, I will be discussing cultural humility as a foundation for ethical practice, focusing specifically on Chapter 12 through 14 of Counseling the Culturally Diverse. The key point I want to highlight from these chapters is the importance of cultural humility. Cultural humility involves self-reflection, recognizing personal biases, and treating clients as experts of their own cultural experiences. By embracing humility, counselors can listen deeply, ask thoughtful questions, and avoid making assumptions based on their own worldview. Cultural humility is both an ethical and spiritual posture that guides every interaction with clients. The American Counseling Association Code of Ethics reinforces the importance of cultural humility. First, A1A, primary responsibility, reminds counselors to respect the dignity and promote the welfare of all clients. In practice, this means a counselor must actively consider the client's cultural background when making decisions or offering guidance, ensuring that their recommendations do not inadvertently impose their own cultural lens. Second, E5B, cultural sensitivity, emphasizes awareness of cultural meanings and expressions of distress. Counselors applying this code take time to understand how culture shapes emotions, coping strategies, and communication styles. For example, a behavior that seems unusual from one cultural perspective could have deep significance in another. Together, these codes highlight that ethical counseling requires seeing the client's experience through their cultural lens, rather than their own assumptions. The American Association of Christian Counselors Code of Ethics also supports cultural humility. ES1 120, Respect for Diversity, highlights the importance of honoring the uniqueness of each client as a reflection of God's image. This encourages counselors to recognize that every person's cultural background and worldview matters deeply, and that honoring these differences is a reflection of reverence for God's creation. ES1 510, Competence in Multicultural Counseling, encourages ongoing training, supervision, and self-assessment to serve diverse clients effectively. It reminds counselors that humility means admitting we don't know everything, seeking guidance, and remaining teachable. This could involve attending workshops, consulting with colleagues, or asking clients to help explain cultural nuances in a session. Scripture provides that ultimate foundation for cultural humility. Philippians 2:3-4 states, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself." For counselors, this teaches that ethical practice starts with valuing the client's perspective above our own ego or assumptions. It's a call to prioritize listening, understanding, and serving others. James 1:19 says, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." This verse reinforces the importance of patience and active listening in counseling. By slowing down and giving clients space to share their experiences fully, we can honor their cultural context and build trust. These verses provide spiritual and practical guidance. Humility, patience, and attentive listening are central to culturally responsive counseling. Why do cultural humility matter? Cultural humility matters because it strengthens trust, reduces bias, and fosters collaborative client-centered care. When counselors walk humbly, they integrate ethical standards, professional competence, and biblical truth to serve clients with respect, integrity, and compassion. For example, a counselor might ask a client to explain a culturally specific tradition rather than making assumptions, showing respect and building trust. This simple practice can make a significant difference in a therapeutic relationship. Cultural humility is not just a professional skill, it's a way for counselors to honor both God and the people He calls them to serve. As we wrap up this section, it's important to remember that cultural humility is an ongoing practice. It calls us to remain teachable, to listen deeply, and to honor clients' cultural experiences as the foundation of effective counseling. These principles are especially vital when working with diverse communities. With this foundation in place, we can now turn to exploring multicultural counseling in specific contexts. What is multicultural counseling in its context? Well, multicultural counseling is a therapeutic approach that centers on how aspects such as race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status shapes a person's life experiences and mental health. This approach involves counselors working with clients from diverse backgrounds to understand and respect cultural differences, recognize systematic issues such as power and privilege, and foster an inclusive environment where clients feel validated and understood. So today we are highlighting multicultural groups that face unique challenges because they are often underserved and underrepresented in American society. This is largely due to their extreme diverse backgrounds and the complexity of their cultural and ethnic origins, which makes grouping them into a single category difficult. Unfortunately, in America, there is a tendency to oversimplify population into broad categories, primarily due to demographic reasons and a historical setup of the system. This practice can lead to misrepresentation, microaggressions, and a fundamental lack of understanding about the complexity of these groups. For instance, the U.S. Census, which takes place every 10 years, counts residents using categories such as white, black or African American, American Indian, or Alaskan Native and Asian. However, it does not break down how residents come from the Middle East or North Africa. The federal government labels them as white, but in reality, they are not treated such and do not have the same privileges. Similarly, Latinx is a pan-ethnic group, and Latinx people can come from any race. Their physical traits vary greatly, including characteristics of indigenous groups, Africans, Asians, and light-complected Europeans. For multiracial Americans, the experience is often complex. A biracial person has multiple cultural backgrounds and identities, but society often unconsciously pressures them to pick a side or adopt a monoracial identity. Below, I have listed 5 key points. 1, understand and identify the different cultural contexts of clients. Provide cultural relevant care. Integrate intersectionality. Address racial discrimination. Affirm and validate client experience. So, it is highly imperative for a counselor to be culturally cultivated. In America, you cannot assume someone's cultural identity based on their appearance alone. This highlights the importance of cultural competence for counselors. Latinx people are the largest growing population in the United States, making up half of the total population growth between 2010 and 2020. They account for 62.1 million people, a quarter of whom identify as Afro-Latino, and 80% of Latinx people are citizens. The multiracial population is the fastest growing racial group in the United States, with 276% increase from 2010 to 2020. Multiracial people are often ignored, neglected, and considered non-existent in educational materials, media portrayals, and psychological literature. So, on the other hand, approximately 3.7 million Arab Americans live in the United States, and 60% of them are Christian. People often assume Arab Americans are Muslim. So, providing cultural relevant care. So that means treatment plans must be moved beyond a one-size-fits-all approach to address the specific needs and cultural factors of each client. Culturally tailored interventions lead to better engagement and outcomes. And then number 2, integrate intersectionality. An intersectional framework helps counselors understand how a person's unique combination of social identities, such as race, gender, class, create unique experiences of oppression and privilege. And then, of course, you got to address racial discrimination. Multiracial people often face discrimination that is not recognized or validated by others. This can result in an increased psychological distress, depression, and internal conflict. And lastly, affirm and validate clients' experiences. A counselor's role is to affirm multiracial clients' lived experiences and recognize that their identity is not the sole cause of their presenting problem. Therapists must validate the client's self-identification rather than imposing their own assumptions. So we're going to be talking about 2 code of conducts. One is the ACA code of conduct. The other one is the AACC code of conduct. One, it talks about, which is section A8, multiple clients. And in AACC, section 1520 talks about cultural competency with Christian counselors. So essentially with multiple clients. So a part of being ethnically diverse is that some of your cultural experiences come from family traditions. So sometimes counselors may have to pull in family members to go over treatment, and maybe the family members are included in the treatment. So when you're counseling multiple people, a counselor must agree to provide counseling services to 2 or more persons who have a relationship. The counselor clarifies at the outset which person or persons are client in the nature of the relationship. the counselor will have with each involved person. If it becomes apparent that the counselor may be called upon to perform potentially conflicting roles, the counselor will clarify or adjust it. Now, as far as Section I-520 in the AACC Code of Conduct, it talks about cultural competency with Christian counselors. So you should strive to develop and maintain culturally competent awareness and practices, but not limited to awareness of one's personal worldview and its impact on the counseling process, knowledge of various cultural practices and worldviews, including those that may conflict with the Judeo-Christian worldview, and of course, cross-cultural sensitivity and skills that enhance that in helping the process. So these two code of ethics are highly important and imperative in the therapeutic relationship. So the Bible verse that stood out the most to me as it pertains to like multiculturalism and accepting people for who they are is Leviticus 19:33.34. So it instructs people to not mistreat or oppress a foreigner living among them. Instead, they should treat the foreigner as a native born person and love them as themselves because the Israelites themselves were once foreigners in Egypt. This passage emphasizes treating strangers with kindness, empathy, and justice.
In this portion of the presentation, we're going to be talking about tunnel vision against social injustice. While there is oppression in this world, one thing we are guaranteed in this lifetime is some form of suffering. One may hinder themselves by only viewing the world as such. This may lead to misunderstanding, rigid negative mentality, or assuming life only consists of oppression. In this portion of the presentation, we are going to discuss the problems that may arise from tunnel vision and the negative outcome of only seeing the world in one way. So the key points on this topic consist of three main core understandings. The first one is seeing what is not there. This basically means that seeing injustice where there is none. The second one is missing what is there. By having tunnel vision, you lose the opportunity of seeing what is there. Having a mindset that sees oppression everywhere can lead to misinterpretation and overreach. And number three is missing the main thing. So missing the beauty of life, missing out on opportunity because of this negative viewpoint of the world. And for Christians, it is missing the gospel. So for the ACA Code of Ethics and AACC Code of Ethics, I did include two code of ethics that relate to tunnel vision in social injustice. Number one is personal values. The counselors are aware of and avoid imposing their own values, attitude, beliefs, and behaviors. For AACC Code of Ethics, respect for others. Christian counselors respect the dignity and worth of all persons and strive to be aware of their own bias and limitations. This just means that it is not in the best interest of the client to have tunnel vision when counseling as a therapist. And lastly, I want to go ahead and include two Bible verses that relate to tunnel vision or tunnel vision as it relates to social injustice. Proverbs 18:13 says, "If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame." And John 7:24 says, "Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment."